Good evening and welcome to Here's the Deal with Shilo and Marvin. Got my trusty co-host with me this evening. How are you, Marv?
I'm doing pretty okay. How are you doing, Shiloh?
I'm doing good.
I'm doing not bad for a second Monday. Let's put it that way.
I hear you on that one.
Boy. So we're gonna have Sandy on tonight, but she messaged me a little bit earlier, said that she had a meeting that ran from 7 to 8, so she'll be joining us shortly, I hope. But yeah, just to get that out there. If you missed our past shows, let's knock out some announcements, Shiloh. We stopped streaming to our personal pages starting tonight. This is going to be our first one. As we are expanding platforms, we only have 8 options that we can send out to from the show. So the only personal page that I still have up is my the Lepford North Dakota Facebook page for people. Until we can get a replacement for that, it's going to be a proxy for now. But moving forward, that's just going to be the status quo. So Shiloh and I can kind of take back our personal pages for family and friends. But yeah, that's some house cleaning. And it looks like you have a fundraiser going, Shiloh. What do you got going on there?
Oh, yeah, that is correct. My daughter Landry. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
So she is a part of the gymnastics team here in Ray, and they are doing their cartwheel-a-thon. The Acro Stars is what they're called. I'll put their, I guess you can't see it all that great. The Acro Stars Gymnastics here in Ray, and they're doing their cartwheel-a-thon on the 18th. And so she is looking for sponsors for her cartwheel-a-thon. And basically what the money goes towards is they have quite the little group here in Ray. They started it a few years ago, like 3-4 years ago, probably even closer to 5. And they had a little building and they actually did some expansion on it. So it is Ray and Tioga, and then they have Powers Lake, some of the girls from Powers Lake, which is 40 some miles away from Ray here. So they all get together and they make up of what they call the Acro Stars. And they do pretty good. And this year Landry moves up to the silvers, so she's kind of in between in the middle. It'll be her second year competing. Little girl, she's really worked hard at her craft and she's getting better every day. It's kind of fun to watch. I don't know if you go to my personal page, you'll see a picture of her sitting on the couch this weekend, and she's basically sitting on the couch how you shouldn't be. Like her belly's against the back of the couch and she's got her feet over touching her head. It makes my back and hips hurt just looking at it. But yeah, she does really good. So, and you can go to my personal page and see the ad there. You can go on the website and sponsor her if you would. That would be greatly appreciated. I know she would appreciate that. So
what exactly is a cartwheel-a-thon? Because that sounds like a good way to have an upset stomach.
So basically, what they do is they're raising money, and the people, they can donate how much ever they want, but Landry gets so many minutes, and I don't remember how many minutes it is, but it's to see how many cartwheels they can do in a certain amount of time. And so yeah, then it's basically, I don't know, it's how they raise money. They get prizes for whoever brings in the most money. They get prizes for who does the most cartwheels. So yeah, that's basically what it is. And it's by each age group. So they got like what they call tiny tots, and then the bronzes. That's, the next step. And then what Landry's in is the silvers, and then golds. And so yeah, that's how they break them up.
Well, it looks like we have Sandy in the background here, so
it does.
Let's get her added and say hello. Hi.
Good evening.
Okay, before we go any further, do you prefer Sandy or Sandra?
Sandy.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. I'm so sorry I'm late.
No, it's fine. Meetings are meetings. I mean, you never get a chance to rest, so I get it.
Well, and life of a wife and mother is there. So that's a reality. Then there's the
That's
meetings.
true.
Then there's the dog. You
Yep.
know?
That's
Yeah,
true.
that's right.
And then the husband might get some attention after all that, right? That's kind of how it works in my
Maybe
house too.
someone, yeah. Yeah, then there's supper, right?
Yep.
Right.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
No,
We
thanks.
appreciate having you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for coming on.
You bet.
So, Shilo, I'm at a little bit of an advantage over you because
Mhm.
Sandy was our neighbor here for a couple years before we moved into District 47. So
That's right.
Gotcha.
I've got a chance to meet her and Brent and see them quite often. So,
Yeah.
but that's not what tonight's about. Why don't we start with you just giving us a little bit of your background, because the bio you sent was really interesting. I mean, you've been pretty much a doer from the day one.
Yeah, that's what my folks will say. They'll say, you know what, I had this baby 52 years ago and she just kept moving. You know, what do I tell you about myself? Did you read the bio? I don't know. Was it
I
something?
did. I'm the one that put together the guest book page for you today.
Okay.
So
Okay. Well, I'll just tell you what. I mean, I'm a fourth generation North Dakotan. I'm originally from Western North Dakota. I grew up in Williston. That's where I went to school, and that's where I graduated from. But my mother is from McKenzie County, which is, people know where Watford City's at, and that's where I have a huge family in McKenzie County in the Watford City area. And then my dad is from north of Minot in the Antler West Oak area. And my mom came from a ranch family, and my dad came from a farm family. So when these, agriculture people, sometimes, well, if they're not an ag, they do not always know the difference between a farmer and a rancher. And my dad's a farmer, and my mom's a ranch girl. And there's a big difference there. So grew up, spent a lot of time again with my dad on the farm. My dad comes from an oil background. And my mom, we spent a lot of time in Watford City. That's where my husband's from, but I really can't tell you, really when I met him necessarily, because I've always kind of known him. But we, dated and in college, and we've been married. It'll be 30 years, actually 30 years. And I always have to ask him, how many years have we been married? 94. Okay. 30 years. And so we were married, went to college at NDSU. He was at UND, made a life in Fargo for a while. And I was in the healthcare industry. I started in nursing, but I became a registered respiratory therapist. And that is when I was, Brent and I were married a few years, and it was the tobacco settlement dollars that were coming into the state of North Dakota. And I was probably 26, 27 years old, not yet a mother. And that was my first introduction into, I would say, a combination of advocacy work and grassroots lobbying. And it was during that time. So Ed Schaefer was our governor, and Heidi Headkamp was our AG. And we had all these funds that were coming back into the state of North Dakota. And there was a, how do you allocate these funds? So that was my first introduction into grassroots lobbying and lobbying for, at that time, I was lobbying for the North Dakota Society for Respiratory Care. But I ended up doing additional lobbyist training. I did some work with the American Association of Respiratory Care, and I worked on the Medicare Reform Act for about 7 years. That was to change 2 words and to add 2 words into the Medicare reform policy. So that takes a lot of patience to just work for 7 years to change 2 words. So I'm not new to this. During that time, I was going out to Washington, D.C. So I'd go out and visit with Conrad and Dorgan and Pomeroy. And so I have been doing this kind of work, whether, I'm lobbying for language like the Medicare Reform Act or the tobacco settlement. Eventually I started getting, Brent and I lived in Fargo for many years, but we left the state of North Dakota, went down to Arizona. Then we ended up in Denver, Colorado before coming back to North Dakota. And when we came back into North Dakota, it was an opportunity to take over his dad's Ford dealership. And so we came back home, and it was to Watford City. So then we were, surrounded by family, and my folks still live in Williston, and and I'm surrounded by family in Watford. So we spent many years there, and that's, people know, that's when Brent ended up being the mayor of Watford City for many years before he ran for lieutenant governor. But during that time, I got into lots of things. I was a mom by this time, and I did a lot of ministry work. Coke Closet ministry was one of the first things I did. And then of course, during the time in Watford City, we started to witness with the oil boom. There was, the boom brought in lots of people from all over the country, and Western North Dakota was very ill-equipped for the families that entered into Watford City because we had no services. So during that time, we started the Coke Closet ministry and some other services that were through Christian moms groups, not through the community, but also we did recognize human trafficking during that time. And so we did start what's called the Watford City Human Trafficking Task Force. That task force has since now merged with a faith-based group out of Bismarck, which is called the 31-8 Project. So I don't know. I just kind of do what I have to do in the community that I'm at. I mean, now I'm in Bismarck and I've been here for a few years, and I've worked foundation work, and I've worked as a registered respiratory therapist. And of course, during COVID, I still did grassroots work.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's where NDCAN came into play, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, Andy Can was three mothers who just basically said, hold on, what's happening? It wasn't, I was probably at that time one of the only ones that had any probably practical experience with lobbying in any way. But I was just connecting with other moms that were just saying, wait a minute, what's going on? Let's talk about this. Let's ask some questions. And we were all being told in our communities that we lived in, because we were it was three moms at first, but it ended up being more like 12 or 14. And then we ended up kind of coming together and formulating what was called North Dakota Conservative Advocates, which is now NDCAN.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you guys had kind of a big bill that went through here in 21 regarding VP3 and being able, the elder care visit bill.
The central caregiver.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, again, if you would have told me, well, and maybe Brent did tell me this, but if somebody would have told me a month before COVID hit North Dakota, I mean, we were watching it in February of 2020 come into we were hearing about it on the East Coast, right?
Mhm.
But if somebody would have told me a month before it hit and infiltrated into our state, that there was going to be a shutdown, and someone was going to tell me that I could not go to work, I would have to go home, and I'd have to shut myself in, and I couldn't make the American dollar move. I mean, I know, with history, and I know that there are certain things within our government that would call for a caution and possibly a shutdown. And yet I just still can't believe what we did to our country. And again, we were under a federal emergency that was in May of 2020. And it was just 3 years. It was just continued in May of 2023. So if you would have told me this was going to happen, I would have told you were crazy. Yeah, that's really what really struck a chord with most of us was COVID.
Give me a second. My mic's echoing on me. Is that better, Shilo?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I had an echo. And I mean, really, the VP3 thing, I mean, that was all over the place. You saw pictures in the Tribune. You saw, for those of you that aren't familiar, VP3 was the vulnerable protection plan. It was for elder care, stuff like that, for long-term care.
Yep.
And so you'd see pictures in the Tribune of families standing outside windows. We saw it driving around town, standing outside of windows of nursing homes where people couldn't get in to see their loved ones.
Right.
And it was really kind of a thing. At one point, I believe Senator Ole Larson had spearheaded a letter to the governor regarding what was going on with that stuff too, which again made news. And it brought a lot of attention to it because a lot of people weren't familiar with what was going on. So yeah, that was a big bill, and you got some national recognition for that as well.
Yeah. So now I have an echo. Let's see here.
I had to shut off my noise cancellation.
Can you still hear me?
Yep.
But you can't hear the echo.
Oh, there's a little bit there.
You've got an echo. No, I do too.
Yeah, they're just trying to silence us.
Okay.
Just roll with it.
Well, I'll tell you what happened with the essential caregiver bill. There was a few of us that myself and my sister-in-law, who's a nurse, and we worked with other states. Is it okay to continue? No, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Try that. See if it gets rid of it.
No,
We're going to play Who Has the Echo.
Okay. Well, I still have the echo. But yeah, North Dakota worked on one, and there was 19 states that ended up passing an essential caregiver bill during that legislative session. And secondary to that, it did get national attention. So now, most recently, well, I shouldn't say recently, it was last summer, it was New York State, I think it was Representative Tenney, introduced what's called the Essential Caregiver Act. And so that was based on all the 19 states that passed essential caregiver bills. And in the state of North Dakota, and the act as well on a federal level, just really prevents long-term care residents from ever being totally isolated, like they were during COVID. But I will have to tell you, there were some nursing homes that shut down in March and April of 2020 and never opened up until the federal emergency was lifted. And people do not know that, in the state of North Dakota, as hard as it was and as difficult as it was, we did pretty well. But there are states and there are facilities all over the country that never truly ever opened back up. And people just do not realize that.
Yeah. And that's horrible to think of, the being stuck there where you couldn't see your family in your final moments.
Right.
So let's fast forward to this last year or so. What inspired you to run for chair?
Well, okay, there's my echo. I've been active in my state district for years. And so wanting to be active was nothing new. I moved into District 35 a few years ago, and as much as one could as a constituent, did some work. But it was probably a few years ago that I looked at the GOP, office and the work that they did, and I knew that it was something that, again, it's my. I'm passionate. I believe in politics. I believe in the processes, and I probably looked at it and thought it could be done better. And so there were many invitations for me to run for this position, and I declined. Many times over, many months. And I suppose what ultimately, the reason I ran, I felt it was time. I knew that I could do the job, and I also, the people that I talked to, and I talked to many different factions, because the Republican tent, as you know, has many different factions, and we always call it this large tent, and people have ideas of the factions in the tent, but it's true. There's a lot of different Republicans in it. And, I criticize me or not. I am to the right of center. It is what it is. And I'm certainly more to the right, especially after COVID. But I will tell you, before I ran on June 16th, there were some people on June 13th or 14th that would have called me an establishment person as well. I was, I basically went to the meeting in some opinion, I was establishment, and I left the meeting a far right, raw milk, anti-vaxxer, flat earther. And so, why did I run? I knew I could do the job. I felt that I had the right politics, but I think the number one reason is I want to lead differently. I do not believe in the top-down kind of leadership that I was witnessing. that I could see, I could clearly see, but I was also experiencing it myself. So I don't believe in that. I believe that the districts and the chairs have those district chairs are leaders in their community. They've been voted in, and we need to allow those districts to do their district work. And I'm not here as with any parental or authoritarian authority. I mean, I just want district chairs to stand up and lead. And I want those districts to, be able to attract constituents and engagement into those districts. I also do not believe in limiting engagement. I really don't. I think if I want everyone to have the opportunity to come to the table, and I don't believe that politics and the GOP and state politics should be a fraternity. I just don't believe in that kind of leadership at all. If you want to partake, then join, and let's see what you can do.
Yeah, that echoes me, Shilo. Give me a second. I'm going to hop on through another portal here. But Sandy, one thing I was going to ask, I know it's an uphill battle here, but what are kind of like next steps for opening it up to the grassroots movements? Because you look at like endorsing conventions, the cost for running for statewide office, just to speak at that event. Does that have to be decided by the districts meeting together? Or does that take a full vote of every district to change those bylaws?
Yeah, it does. That came up at the, we had our first state meeting since the election in June, and that was Friday, October 13th. And that there was a resolution that was brought forward, and absolutely it takes a majority vote. And I do believe that there was